Welcome to Political No-Brainer Podcast. This is not going to be a political discussion whatsoever. I am joined here today. We do get into real conversation. We do get past winner takes all politics here. It's not a topic today. I'm joined here with Temple Grandin, an extraordinary scientist, an extraordinary college professor, an extraordinary writer, researcher, inventor. I'm excited to be here. Today's topic is, though, it is very much the importance of improving the lives of autistic people through education and accommodations. The other subject we'll discuss is how to explain how to look up medical subjects in scientific databases. These are two things. These are areas that you have a clear understanding on,
Yeah.
and you are the person we want to hear from. I want to do less of the talking and more of the listening because I want to hear from you, Temple Grandin. Uh, and I just want you to jump in whenever you're ready.
Well, I am ready. And uh, when I was a child, I, I like to put it this way. When I was a little child, like, 6 years old, 7 years old, mother had high expectations with some accommodations. And I want to give you some examples. When we went on vacation, we had to go on a ferry boat, one of these boats where you drive the cars on, 45-minute trip. And when it got into the harbor on the end of the trip, it had a very loud horn. And I was up on the deck. Everybody liked to ride on the deck. Well, that was underneath the horn. I remember screaming, flinging myself on the deck. So the accommodation was to let me ride downstairs in the enclosed cabin underneath. I didn't have to be on the deck, but we are going to go on the ferry. Yeah. Otherwise, we wouldn't be able to go on vacation if we didn't go on that ferry. So
Ex-
that's a high expectation. We're going to go on that ferry. I mean, today it could be noise canceling headsets, but we are going to go on that ferry. And then at family gatherings, when I was a young kid, they gave me a place to exercise. I could run up five stairs and beat the elevator to my grandmother's apartment. That and I always beat it. Or when I had another other house that had a hall I could run in. That was an accommodation. But there was some expectation that we were going to do family gatherings and not have them totally ruined by screaming and yelling or some other problem. Um, Now let's look at where there's some accommodations really needed for adults. One is I have no working memory. I have no working memory for sequential, verbally given information. If somebody tells me I got to do this task, this step, this step, this step for a task, I need to make a pilot's checklist with bullet points to jog my memory. And pilots are actually required to use this. Very simple thing. We need to teach the autistic individual how to make their own checklists. And when I worked in a dairy when I was in graduate school, they had a checklist there on how to set up and clean the milking equipment. If somebody had just explained that to me, I would not have been able to remember some of the steps in the sequence. So using written instruction checklists. Also, let's avoid the jobs that are just multitasking chaos. Super crazy busy takeout window, better to avoid that one. Extra time on tests, that's another one. They can make a big difference. I had to be tutored and tutored and tutored and tutored in math because I was so bad in math. And one of the things I did when I failed my first quiz, I asked for help. Lots of students today, not just the autistic ones, they don't ask for help quickly enough. And then you email them, and half of them will contact me, half of them won't. They don't ask for help, and this has gotten really bad since COVID. Yeah, so we need to make some accommodations. The checklists are really important, and I would need to just say to the boss for like making a certain coffee drink at Starbucks, let me just write down the steps. And if the boss thinks that's stupid, then I would just say pilots need a checklist. I need one too. I like to keep things really simple. Also, we need the skills of autistic individuals. When I was out working on equipment all the time, I spent 25 years out on big construction projects, and I had people build equipment for me that owned big metal fabrication shops that were definitely autistic. They were extreme visual thinkers like me, object visualizers. In fact, I discussed that in my book, Visual Thinking, Hidden Gifts of People Who Think in Pictures, Patterns, and Abstractions. And some of these people absolutely can't do algebra in the abstract. I can learn how to do practical math, like learning the math you would need to do water flows and pipes, and then certain formulas are associated with that. I can do that. But the math in the abstract, I can't remember it. And I'm concerned that these extreme visual thinkers are getting screened out with all the math requirements. But another kind of autistic is your mathematician. You're super good mathematicians. Most of them are autistic. We need their skills in the computer industry. We need the skills of people on the autism spectrum. Another problem we've got is autism goes all the way from Bill Gates, now official, Bill Gates is autistic, to somebody that they can't dress themselves. This is another problem with the name. You're diagnosed ADHD or dyslexic, it's much more narrow. But people get too hung up on the labels. I'm seeing too many parents of 16-year-olds that are fully verbal, and these 16-year-olds and these teenagers have never gone shopping by themselves. They're not learning how to do basic things. Have a bank account. And these are things that I was taught when I was really young.
So is there an assumption, and I'm just asking this question, is there an assumption that if you are not necessarily every parent, but some parent have the assumption if they have an autistic child, they can't teach them these things? And then the question is, let's dispel that myth, because it is a myth and it's a wrong assertion to come to that conclusion.
Oh no, it's wrong.
Absolutely wrong.
And what's happened now in the construction trades is the autistic guy, the undiagnosed one, that was that maintenance person in the shop that could fix anything, they're not getting replaced. I know a person who absolutely can't do algebra. He's got 2 corporate jets. He builds beef plants. And he sent me a very discouraging text about 2 weeks ago. I don't know how long my beautiful plant can run on new. They can't find the right people to maintain it. Because some of the right people to maintain some of this mechanical equipment are some of the autistic people. Now, let's take in a food processing plant where you need the mathematicians is for the refrigeration, power and water requirements, make sure the roof doesn't collapse. That's where you need the mathematical side of engineering. But I worked a lot of people that designed and patented a lot of mechanical things that were definitely on the spectrum that couldn't do higher math. You need both kinds of minds to make the factory work.
And often that higher curriculum math, we'll just call it that. We'll just call it
algebra.
The higher.
I'm talking about algebra, calculus. Now, practical math, I was just reading an article in the paper on the lack of math skills and things like fractions and understanding, for example, a pipe, like a standard pipe we'd use in a corral systems is out of the oil fields is 2 7/8. 2 7/8 OD pipe. Well, I understand the kind of math required for that. I can draw that in a scale drawing. I can figure out what size is the pipe where one could fit in the other one like a sleeve. That kind of math I can do. And there were deficits even in the real practical math. But what I'm seeing in some of the schools is they're pushing all this abstract math when they ought to be learning a lot more. Okay, how do you make 2/3 of a recipe, for example? How do you calculate pressure for hydraulic cylinders? That kind of stuff I know how to do.
Right. So here's my question, and not to get political, I'm going to use the acronym DOGE, Department of Government Efficiency. Let's get into Department of Private Sector Efficiency. Would it be beneficial to the private sector to get past the notion that you have to do really well in college, that you have to get a degree in a pedigree college to be hired with us? Would it be beneficial to the private sector to get with autistic people and understand what their skills are and decipher where they would utilize their skills best?
Well, I think what I did is I showed off my work. That is how I got jobs. I show people my drawings. Okay, I can show you one I've got right in here. I showed the work off. That's how these people that started out with small shops that turned into big shops. Like there's one of my drawings. Oh, I got that upside down there. There's another one of my drawings.
Wow.
Yeah. And yeah, the 30-second wow. I sold my work by showing off my drawings, pictures of jobs. And then when I started my early career, I was livestock editor for our state farm magazine. And people respected the fact that when I covered a meeting, I covered it accurately. I didn't misquote people. I got respect for that. I learned to sell my work, to display my work. I started out when I was a teenager with a little sign painting business. And I'd show people pictures of my signs. And that's how I sold my work. You have a kid that's a mathematician. You show the math work or some of the programming off the people. You show it to the people that can appreciate it, not the human resources department. You want to show it to the people that will really understand it and appreciate it.
So here's my question. So we lived in a time, you and I, Temple Grandin and Jeff Rabinowitz, we lived in a time where you literally got an interview. That's the way we lived in that time. I
That's
remember I
right.
was always in the restaurant industry. I went to a trailer in a parking lot that had the building was behind us getting constructed. It was going to be a new restaurant. I sat down with the manager that was going to run that restaurant, and I sold myself.
Yeah.
And he loved my personality. He loved me. I always got jobs. Today we live in a world where you've got to slip past the goalie, and the goalie's not that interview. The goalie's Indeed. The goalie is the interview via online. That there's an algorithm that goes with that online interview where you have to hit certain high marks in that resume you submit to match their high marks they're looking for. So would it be beneficial to corporate America to go back to the old school idea of interviewing people?
All right, sometimes the interviews don't go that well because if I show off my drawings to an HR person, they don't recognize the drawings. I sold jobs by showing the drawings to the people that would be interested in buying the cattle handling facility, the plant manager, the feedlot owner, the cattle buyer. Those are the people that would be interested in my drawings. Now, half of all good jobs are still gotten backdoor just through contacts. I
Through
got
knowing
I got
someone.
into all sorts of things that way. And with that press pass, I got into all kinds of conferences, big expensive registration fees that I would not have been able to go to otherwise. You see, and you know how I started that job? I walked up to the editor, and he was at a cattle event. And I asked for his card, and then I offered up an article to him. I produced the article, and then I went back and said, well, maybe I could do a column. But I walked up to him. There's a scene in the HBO movie, Temple Grandin, where I get the card. That happened. And it was very important for my career. That was total backdoor.
And total when you say backdoor, that's the operative word. You did something out of the ordinary. You took a chance. You reached out to somebody that may not have even wanted to take your card. But would it be beneficial to corporate America to swing that back door wide open, to really understand who's offering what
Well, I
at
think
every
some
level?
some tech companies have like hackathons, programathons, where they bring kids in to kind of do contests. And but there's so many things where you meet the right person, they can open the back door. And this goes back to when I was 9, I had to sell candy for charity. So I had the guts to go up and ask for the card. Also, in
Right.
my generation, kids had to be hosts and hostesses at parents' parties. You had to greet the guests. And then when I read Bill Gates's book, Source Code, I found out that he had to do the same thing. You see, that was a thing that my generation did. You know, we've got kids today, just regular kids, flunking a course because they don't ask for help. They don't know how to go up and get the card. And
And
this is where I'm really pushing the parents now that we need to find paper route substitutes for these young autistic kids where they have to do some things. They have to talk to people. And they also have to learn how to work outside the family. You walk the neighbor's dog and get paid a little bit for it. You can be a volunteer at a church and you got to greet the people as they come in and pass the programs out. And you're going to have to shake hands with them.
And there we are, that category, where we develop autistic children. And how do we get that done on a bigger scale? Because like you said, and we talked about this in the last interview, you were greeting people at school dances. Your counselors knew that was a valuable
Yeah, we
opportunity for
just
you
got
to
to
grow.
start doing that kind of stuff. And right now I'm telling you that I'm realizing, and then especially after I read Bill Gates's book, he had to sell stuff for charity too, right about the same age, and realizing, yeah, then I had the guts to go up and ask for the card because I'd sold candy for charity. I had to go up and knock on doors, and was mother beside me? No. You know, today they get worried about safety. Well, then mother would be on the street waiting in the car. Too often I see kids selling Girl Scout cookies or whatever, and mom's right there. No, the kid has to go up and ask the shopper to buy the cookies. They've got to learn how to do that.
That is absolutely true because I know I did stuff just like that. Growing up as a kid, I always say, growing up as a kid, I cut grass, but in order to get the accounts, I didn't have a Google ad. I didn't have a
No.
newspaper ad. I knocked on doors and said, "Hey, your grass is tall. Can I cut your grass? And here's how much." We've sort of lost that, but the valuable part of it, growing up as an older, I mean, I literally emailed you and I said, "Temple Grandin, will you do my podcast?" I reach out to a lot of people
Yeah, that's
because of
right.
that because of that skill that I developed as a child. And I
That's
just
right.
want to see, and I want to see more people. And we keep, when I speak to you, we're focused on the idea of cultivating the skills of autistic children. But it's not just autistic children that are lacking in skills. It's a lot of categories. It's a lot of
Well, we
children that
have
are.
we have I've talked to a lot of professors at a lot of different universities, and one of the big problems today, these kids don't ask for help. They'll flunk out of school. When I was a freshman and I failed my first math quiz, I went right to the teacher. I was in a small school. He tutored me in his office. In the bigger schools, then with my master's, I hired a graduate student to tutor me. I did something about it right away.
And ultimately, you've created an enormous amount of skills. You're constantly doing new things that people are always watching and always want to hone in on and understand what you're doing next. And just like you said, when you were a younger child, this is how you developed your skills. And that's really where the conversation goes. Is yes, it applies to autistic children. Yes, we are leaving a lot of autistic children behind. We're assuming they're never going to develop fully, and that's just a wrong assumption.
Oh, it
They
is a
could
wrong
not.
assumption.
It's the wrong assumption. They could very well develop fully, and they could excel over and above the children that aren't autistic. That's the assumption we should building a sense of awareness about. And that's always why I seek out your interviews is to understand that, to understand how we do that more and more and more and more.
Well, they get totally locked into the diagnosis. But since COVID, I'm finding in my class, I've got 80 students in my livestock handling class. I have a really hard time getting them to ask questions, getting them to engage. Before COVID, they were much more likely to engage. And I think it's because during COVID, they had a whole year or more of just doing everything online. And it's hard to get them to talk. I might have two or three students that are big talkers, and I finally have to say, well, I want somebody else, and I'm going to just start picking somebody. And then I just start picking them. And that helps to get things going.
But like you said, and it's not just COVID, it's not just online courses, it's also social media. I mean, kids are communicating on their phone 99% of the time via text, via social media. They're not communicating they're not talking like me and you. They're not picking up the
Well,
phone and
that's the
talking.
problem.
It's a
That's the
big
problem.
it's a big problem. And I just think we need to realize and we need to convey that message. You know, Warren Buffett, who I actually quote sometimes, says communication's everything. You know, if you wink at a girl in a dark room, she's not going to even know you're winking. So that's the same thing. If you can't convey your message to somebody, you're not
Yeah,
conveying your message.
no, that's right.
And
You know,
so, go ahead.
the other kind of jobs that the visual thinkers like me be very good at is really high-end skilled trades. I'm not talking about floor tiles and stuff like that. I'm talking about doing the real high-end stuff. And we have a huge shortage of people to maintain mechanical equipment. And an ideal job for someone that, person that likes equipment, you have these big water pumps that keep the water tower full. Well, if that pump doesn't work, the water tower is not filled and you're not going to have any water. You're going to care about that pump when it fails to work.
And they and not to get political, but as we look in today's day and world, as far as the military is concerned, we're starting to realize that these bigger planes and these bigger tanks aren't what we really need. We're starting to see the value in drones and the value in less expensive equipment, and these younger people in general, the next generation could very well be the generation that develops this stuff. And so, how do we get
Well,
everyone
I had an
involved?
interesting talk with a veteran that I sat next to on an airplane, and we got to talking about education. And she was one of these people that had failed algebra in college, totally had failed it, but enlisted in the Army and was tested for mechanical aptitude, which is visual thinking, basically. And they basically told her, you're going to fix airplanes. You can fix this airplane over there or that one over there, but you're going to be fixing airplanes. the Army valued the mechanical aptitude. And there's tests for that. But on the other hand, mechanical aptitude does have to be developed. Kids need to play with ramps and levers and these kinds of things. A simple mechanical aptitude question would be, you have a weak bridge, and a truck is parked either in the middle of the bridge or close to the supports. Close to the supports or the middle of the bridge. Which position would be most likely to break the bridge? It would be the truck in the middle of the bridge. That's just a very simple mechanical question.
But do you ever see a day and time and age where when we think of K through 12 education, we very much think of what it is today? Right. And what it is today is we're going to go through the motions. We're going to have a certain amount of science. We're going to have a certain amount of social studies. We're going to have, of course, a certain amount of reading and writing and math. But now you just mentioned the importance of mechanical engineering. It doesn't mean every child is going to be a mechanical engineer. It does mean that if we incorporate mechanical engineering in our K through 12 education system, we're going to develop the minds in a better way, in a way that'll that'll achieve more and accomplish more because of that new initiative in K through 12 education. So what would be your suggestion if we were to revamp some of our education system?
Well, I think let's start with little kids. I was out on a very big, gigantic construction project with some very, very high-end skilled trade stuff. And I said, we got to get kids making things in elementary school. I'm seeing too many kids that are brilliant with Legos, building all kinds of original things, but they never graduate the tools. That's wrong. I was in woodworking when I was in 5th grade. Kids don't make things. I had a girl in my class who had never used a tape measure or a ruler to measure anything. It's like they're removed from the practical world. I also was reading some of the materials on reading scores. So let's say you read an essay and they're not able to tell me what's sort of the bottom line thought of that essay. All right, let's say it was whether we should have a dog park or not have a dog park. I'm going to take something where I'll stay out of the controversial stuff. And then at the end of the essay, is this person in favor of the dog park? Is against the dog park? Why? Okay, just answer just the basic questions like that.
And when we do that, this is the point. When we do that, we develop new skills. We develop new mental skills. We develop an avenue for these people, for young people, to use their brain in a different way. What will it take to get our educators? So let me just go again, not to go ultra political. We did have a controversy where it's time to close the Department of Education. Within that department, I'm not saying whether it was the right decision or the wrong decision. I'm not even forming an opinion on that. Within that department was educators, a lot of them. What about bringing them back into bringing them back into a government agency that rethinks our education system?
I don't know. I'm going to just say I'm just concerned. I think one of the things where I think the math got off the rails is they're going into all this abstract algebra and not enough into just how do we use fractions in the practical world, like with a 2 7/8 outside diameter pipe, for example. Just more the practical math, the applied math. They're not getting that. How do you do 2/3 of a recipe, as I said before? Just those sorts of things. And on the reading, you should be able to read an essay and tell you, okay, this person is for the dog park, and these are the reasons why, and this is the reasons why he doesn't agree with the person who's against the dog park. Can you just tell me those bottom lines?
And that's really not a part of our education system.
No, but that's part of the problem. And this showed up in the latest reading test results, that they couldn't read an essay or an editorial and sort of tell you what the viewpoint was. And I just used the dog park because it is non-controversial.
Well, the dog park is a great example, and it's an emotional attachment to a subject, and it should be something we are incorporating in everyday education. And like you said, so I literally, when I start my day,
you might say, okay, there might be another thing. Are we going to widen this road? That happened here in town, and it didn't cause any houses to be torn down, but it caused a lot of front lawns to be greatly made smaller. And okay, there's reasons for, and I'm seeing the road. It's a road in my neighborhood. This was about 20 years ago. And they did widen it. And it did mess up some people's lawns. And see, this is where there's going to be better traffic widening the road, and there's going to be some people who are going to have their lawns made a lot smaller. Okay, that's the pros and cons of widening the road. Being a visual thinker, I'm seeing a particular house. They had to build a wall when their lawn got made smaller because there was a big grade on the site. So people are not going to like to have their lawns made smaller, but it's going to reduce the traffic congestion going into the university in the morning. See, now I see it as I talk about that.
Very much so, right?
Yep, I see it.
That's you see it. You understand what's going to happen. You understand the pros and the cons. You know how when you talk about that particular thing, I think about my own kids. We go in my backyard, it's huge. My kids say we can put this giant pool back here. We should have this giant pool. I say no, because if you look at the backyard, a part of this backyard is an easement. It means we can't put a pool in 50% of the backyard because if the power company needs to run a power line in my backyard, they have to have that land available. People don't even understand that
Oh, I
much. That
understand that.
yes,
Well, the thing is, I worked in construction and really, I had to work around railroad right of ways. Yeah, and you have to obey those. In fact, one project I worked on 4 years ago, they had to put the loading ramp around a big alleyway that went around like this. The loading ramp, you keep it out of the railroad. I mean, you can't go on. You guys, then there's a setback, and you have to follow that.
right. And
I
it's just
understand that.
you very much understand it. I sort of understand it. I do understand it to an extent, but so many people don't understand the most important things that we don't really convey those messages. When the only time those messages, as far as I'm concerned, the only time I realize that those understandings has come from parents of affluent homes. But kids that don't have parents that teach them a lot of stuff don't ever learn those things, right?
Well, you see, but
So
you see, this is where we need lot more hands-on things, like a lot more practical math, and we're not getting that. And you need, fractions and building materials. I mean, now the 2x6 is down to an inch and a half thick. Used to be an inch and 3/4. They're really making them skinny now. I was out on a project and they bought some 2x6s and we measured them. I was just horrified. And the 2x6 has been getting smaller and smaller.
So, it reminds me of a friend that I knew. He worked for a large construction company here in Orlando, and he started out as a laborer. But just like you said, whether he learned it from his parents, because I doubt he learned those sort of things you were just talking about from skills he learned in school, he ultimately he grew at that company. He became a project manager. He's now no longer in the hot sun nailing two by fours up on a wall. He's in an office with all sorts of blueprints, and they paid for a lot of his advanced education to keep him growing with the company. How many kids simply never get that opportunity simply because they don't understand this? Like you said, how many kids simply don't get that
Well, I have
opportunity?
talked to quite a few shop teachers, and they tell me they have to spend 2 weeks teaching measurement. That didn't have. I didn't have to be taught measurement. We were doing that fourth grade
Wow.
when I was
And
a child.
but that the fact that they were teaching measurement almost is a real big plus because I don't
Well,
remember
they're
in my
teaching it,
school.
but they said it. Yeah, but when I took shop, they didn't. In fifth grade, when I was 11, they didn't teach measurement. They just told you had to measure carefully.
And then you learned it on your own,
And I
right?
learned, and you cut something wrong, you wrecked. I remember sewing project. I cut it wrong and I ruined it. I did. There was no way to get buy any more fabric, and fabric I had was what's called a remnant, which was just sort of an end lot, and there was no more of that fabric. I ruined the project. You want to
But you
measure
learned from
carefully.
that mistake.
Oh yeah, I did. I remember it very well, and measure carefully. But I knew how to measure. But now shop teachers tell me they spend 2 weeks just teaching adults how to measure.
And we're so just getting back to the basics of teaching the basics of life, of dropping life on children and adults. And it's really something we need to do more of. Because, like,
Yeah,
whenever we think of your experience or my experience, and we're really on the topic of your experience as a child, all the learning experiences you took on as a child, every one of them, whether they were by accident or whether they were by education formula, made you the person you are today,
yeah.
made you the inventor you are today, made you the professor you are today, made you the writer you are today, and the researcher you are today. I'm always trying to understand how we give every child, every single child, this opportunity, because we have this growing chasm between rich and poor. People are working for 16 bucks an hour and barely even able to pay their rent. And there's people that are really excelling in certain industries and making millions. And
Um,
and I'm and I'm always trying to wonder how we can do better, enabling people to do more. And
well, I think we need to get back to teaching some basics, because one of the things we looked at some of these math skills was things like understanding fractions in doing real things. And you see, now when I was working on the corral construction, we used oil field material, and it was all fractional. Like we had a 2 7/8 and some, I think a 2 3/8, and uh, it was none of it was whole number measurements. They had all these odd sizes of pipe, and that's what you use because we could pick that pipe up used.
right. And none of this is proprietary to teaching
Oh
an
no,
autistic
no,
child.
there's nothing proprietary about used oil field material.
No, no, and none
Nothing.
of it's proprietary about teaching
No.
a child, any child. We can all have these experiences. We're just not using them on a wide
The
scale
other
throughout our.
thing on measurement is, you see, I had to learn how to do drawings in metric too. And then when I did design work, I would do rough, okay, like a 10-foot wide alley. I'd make it 3 meters. That's not exact, but then you don't have like a weird fractional metric measurement. It doesn't make much sense. So a 12-foot was a crowd pen was a 3.5. I did some things like that. And then I drew everything in metric. Because in other countries they use metric. And if you're going to be doing woodworking and stuff, I mean, need to learn that. Is the minute you go down to Mexico, everything's metric.
Right. And a lot of other places other
And
than
a
America.
lot of other places too. And so, I mean, I think, kids need to be taught both. You see, and then you have what's called the engineering ruler, where an inch is divided into tenths.
And I've
The
seen those, the
engineering
triangular
ruler
rulers.
with English measurements. So this is just real. I had to learn all this stuff. I drew drawings in metric for other countries.
Wow. All your experiences absolutely fascinate me. And I think they fascinate a lot of people. It's not just me that's absolutely. All your experiences and all the skills you've developed over the years from all your experiences are absolutely fascinating. And that's why I always want to talk to you about them, how we potentially grow individuals to be the best they can. And that's something. Then the other thing we talked about was how you're willing to explain how to look up medical subjects on scientific databases. Can we get
Well,
into
that's
that a
right.
little?
Well, there's been a lot of controversies. Well, I've talked about in my book about the visual thinkers, the math thinkers, then of course you get the verbal thinkers. And verbal thinkers tend to overgeneralize on a lot of different things. Now, when you really get into scientific databases, really deep, you'll find on many different things, it's not black and white. The results on a lot of stuff can be a lot more mixed. And one of the assignments that I have my students do, my livestock handling class, is I want to have them pick out a subject in animal behavior that interests them. Now, you can't be too general, like dog behavior, for example. That's too general. You could do play behavior in dogs, for example. I want to make it so that it's narrow enough to force them to dig into the databases, but not so narrow they can't find any literature. But I want the student looking up something that actually interests them. I get a lot of things about wildlife, and one student one time did bees. And so they pick out a subject. We have to approve it to make sure it's sort of the correct amount of narrowness. Now, there's 4 regular scientific databases. You have Google Scholar, which is free and open. You have PubMed, P-U-B-M-E-D, or Medline. That is the U.S. The website that goes into mainly medical. It's mainly medical, veterinary and medical, where Google Scholar covers everything: physics, medicine, animal behavior, just everything is in Google Scholar. Then you have PubMed, which is pretty limited to medical. Now, those two databases are free. There's no paywalls. Then you've got Web of Science, and if you're at a university, you'll automatically be able to get into that. And that's a very respected database. And then you have all the Elsevier journals. Elsevier publishes a lot of journals, and they've got Science Direct as one of their databases. Scopus is another one of their databases. Those will be paywalled. But you can still go into a university library and get into those databases. So what the students have to do is they've got to take, when the students do have access to all of those, is take their, let's say, dog play behavior, for example, and I want the front page of a journal article, 2 from each database. 2 from Google Scholar, 2 from PubMed, 2 from Web of Science, 2 from one of the Elsevier databases. And the thing that they'll learn as they search these databases, 70% of the material probably overlaps. But there might be one really important article that you find just on one of the databases. And a whole lot of students don't even know the databases exist. And the Web of Science and Elsevier databases, they cover all subjects. And then in education, you have ERIC. But a lot of students don't know the databases exist. And this takes you away from a lot of the rubbish that's online, and you're going strictly into scientific papers, books written by scientists. And a lot of people don't know these databases exist. Now, you get into a whole pile of literature on something, you're often going to find it's not totally black and white. It's not so simple. That's one.
So I'm going to tell you, the only database I knew of, and I'm a research fanatic, is PubMed. Now I know of 4 others, and I'm glad I know of them, because I'm going to start digging.
PubMed is good, but let's say I want to look up grazing and range management. That won't be in PubMed.
No.
Physics, that's not going to be in PubMed. Google Scholar would cover the grazing management and cover the physics. So would Web of Science and the Elsevier databases. I think Google Scholar, I use Google Scholar a lot, and you see there's no paywall. The other 2 databases, and PubMed is free. PubMed's really good. If it's a medical something, that's a really good database. But you're not going to find something on orbital paths of satellites, for example.
No, not on PubMed.
Something that will not be on that.
So let me delve into a hypothetical question, and it's a hypothetical question. Just say we decided to take biology out of class and create a class that teaches you about these 5 research websites that literally, like you said, 2 of them you can either access through a paywall or through a university.
The 2 of them, the 2 of them are free. Google Scholar and PubMed are free.
Are free.
And there's no paywall. The other 2 you'll be paywalled. But you can, a lot of times, if you're a student at a university or faculty, they have a subscription. You can get in. But visitors cannot often go to a university library and use the paywall databases as long as they're in the library. They have to physically go to the library and they can use those databases.
So let's say we just have this mass movement now where high schools across the country actually, just like you said, like a university, have these websites open, have subscriptions, and we teach our students. We decide we're going to revamp our biology, and we're going to teach these 4 websites. We're going to teach them. We're going to get them on the classroom.
Then what I have them do is they have to pick. Let's say we take dog play behavior for my example. They have to give me 2 front pages, which has the summary. The summary in a research paper is called an abstract. It's a summary. And I wanted to print out the first page of each paper so they can show me that they went to all 4 databases and they found 2 papers on each database. Now, I used to have them summarize them, but I'm not interested in grading ChatGPT's work. I'm just not interested in grading the work done by AI. So, but the thing I'm getting really strict on is I got to make sure they actually went to all 4 databases. And so that means they've got to go, like to PubMed, for example, print out the abstract page, and I got to see the PubMed logo up there or the Web of Science logo to make sure they actually went to the databases. And I had one student thank me and said that they'd solved the family health problem. But I tell the students, and these are students in my livestock handling class, that this might be one of the most important things you can learn. Now, since it is an animal behavior class, yeah, they are going to have to do something on animal behavior. But I let them do it on any animal. I don't restrict it to
Not necessarily dogs or
No,
cats.
no. They could do cattle, but they could also do tigers if they wanted to.
Yes, and that would be interesting.
Well, and I want
interesting.
them to pick out something that actually interests them. But I want them to learn how to use the databases. And another one of my assignments is they have to do scale drawing.
Wow.
And I've had students say, why would I ever want to make a scale drawing? And I said, what if you remodel your house? Or even you want to buy some furniture. You want to make sure the new sofa is going to fit. If you live in New York, you better make sure the new sofa fits in the building's elevator.
Or possibly the stairway, which could be an absolute 3-day journey.
Well, yeah, let's be on the 20th floor. That's not going to be so wonderful.
A nightmare.
And there's a company, my sister told me, there's a company in New York called the Couch Doctors. And the couches that don't fit in the elevators, they cut them up out on the street. and then bring them into the pieces up to the apartment, and then they reassemble them.
Reupholster some of the edges.
Oh, they would have to reupholster some.
Yeah, some of the edges and stuff. So this is absolutely incredible what we just covered, because one of the questions I had for myself was to ask you about PubMed and how. So you do this in your college courses. You're a college professor. You're not a high school.
Yes, that's right.
Right. So, and that's really my question is, how about incorporating this in our high school years, in our 11th and 12th grade, especially the research piece?
People argue over whether a study is a good study or a bad study. And the gold standard is, so let's say we're going to test a drug, whether it works for a certain kind of cancer, let's just say. And the gold standard is you have a control group where they get a sugar pill, and you have the real group that gets the real thing. And everything's done blinded. Nobody knows who's getting what. And you determine whether the drug works. Or you might compare the new cancer drug to an old cancer drug, but everything's blinded. That's the gold standard. But you have other things where doing that is not really possible. You might, especially on some of the epidemiological research, you're finding out, well, it's this polluted river. And I'm old enough to remember really bad pollution. I'm 78 years old. Boat toilets in Boston Harbor that flushed into the harbor. Disgusting. Oh, we don't want to go back to that.
But we've moved mountains since then, right?
We've changed a lot. And we don't want to go back to that kind of stuff.
No.
Or a paper mill this is from my childhood, that just dumped all the paper pulp crap into the river. It was hideous. There's a lot of discussion right now. I'm old enough to remember when there were no controls at all, and it was disgusting.
It was horrible.
It was absolutely horrible. And I mean, that's one advantage of being an elder now. I can remember these things. Okay, let's say we wanted to do a study if some chemical that was dumped in the river was making people sick. Well, it's kind of hard to get a control group. You say, I might have to do something. Well, here's a town where the river was polluted. Here's a similar town where it's not. That's not totally a controlled experiment, but it might be all I can do. You can get something like that. And then somebody might say, I didn't do a controlled experiment, so that data is just garbage. Then you start reading a whole bunch of stuff. One, Like one paper will say the drug works, another paper will say it doesn't work, and then you start looking at how did they assign subjects to treatment, especially on surveys. I'm always asking if I review a paper, well, how did you pick out your survey subjects? Okay, let's go back to the town where hello? You just
Yeah.
frozen? Oh, wait a minute. You were
No,
saying
we're
so
good.
thought you were frozen.
No, ma'am. No, ma'am. I'm just listening.
Okay, because if I don't want I have to log out if before the server goes down, the router goes down.
No, no, we are not frozen.
Okay, all right. Okay, you were just so still. I thought you were frozen.
I was listening. I'm just
You're
fascinated
listening.
with everything you're saying.
These are things where teaching students, you know, how to evaluate different scientific research, and in some cases, the gold standard placebo-controlled experiment's not possible. And then you look at data. There's a lot of things where it's not quite so black and white when you really start looking at data, really start looking at things. I think it's something that people need to learn how to do that.
Absolutely. A really interesting life experience I had with what we were just talking about how back in the day when waste was just thrown into the ocean,
Oh
or
no, it
waste
was
was
terrible.
it was terrible. And I remember I had a sales job once and I would sell promotional items. I sold umbrellas to a theme park, 3,000 umbrellas. They had so many colors on this umbrella. They were really decorative, shades and colors. And I remember it was cheaper and easier to farm them out to China than it was to produce them here because the waste, the chemical waste that came from producing those umbrellas would be so costly to dispose of here in the United States. But in China, they have a lot looser regulations. They can dump that waste in a just probably out in the back of the warehouse for all we know. Not that I'm generalizing how China does things. I'm just saying that. And so I'm glad we've gotten past that thinking.
Well, you see, you have to have. I'm kind of like have fewer, stricter regulations. I kind of like traffic as a model. Nobody would like to say, well, let's get rid of the breathalyzer for drunk driving. We don't have to enforce speeding. But traffic rules work because they're simple and they only enforce about three main ones: drunk driving, speeding. Okay, if you run a red light, if they see you, they'll catch you there. Seat belts. Um, and by enforcing pretty strictly on the drunk driving and the speeding, you drastically cut down on the accidents. In food safety, that's what's called critical control points, the things that are really important to enforce. Instead of everything just turning into a whole pile of paperwork, they measure your breath for drunkenness. They measure your speed with a device. It's measured. It's not just someone thinks you're speeding.
Right. And that's an incredible logic that you just conveyed to me because I'm not a big fan of regulation. I am a fan of effective regulation. I'm not a big fan of just creating regulation for the
Well, you
sake of
can get
creating it.
regulations where you can't do anything. Well, I think
Right.
the regulation is that boat toilets cannot just dump out of the boat. And now every boat toilet in the 50s flushed into the water.
Right into the water. And we've changed that. We've
Yeah,
actually
we changed
reversed
that,
that.
and
We've
that should be
reversed it.
changed. And that should be changed.
Absolutely. And
Boston
that's
Harbor was an open sewer. I used to, well, we lived near Boston Harbor. It was disgusting.
and that was the CCP thinking, the critical control point thinking, is we
Oh
got to
yeah,
that.
you don't. There's certain stuff like boat toilets that flush into and even the great big boats. All the boat toilets just flushed into the water. It was absolutely gross.
So this is really we've gotten to a temple. We've gotten into some great stuff here, and I want to continue, but like we said, sometimes we can talk for a while. Can we continue this another day?
Yeah, maybe we could do it another day, but on the thing you're going to find on a lot of issues, I mean, you can get into so much nitpicking and paperwork regulations that you can't even do anything.
Right.
That's ridiculous. And there's some stuff like boat toilets that flush into the water that just needs to be banned. I think most people that have any sense would agree with that.
And there's a cost factor.
And I'm old enough to remember just how disgusting that was.
And I was going to say there's a cost. Just the fact that you can't do it is going to cost, but it's okay to absorb that cost. I get it. Regulation.
Well, you can also give a phase-in period with all new boat construction. You're going to have a holding tank and
dispose of it
you
correctly.
can't have a paper mill that just dumped raw paper mill junk
Ink.
into the river.
Yeah.
My brother went to a summer camp and he said he had to dodge the crud bars on the lake. Crud bars were clumps of paper pulp.
Fortunately, they were clumps of paper pulp and not other stuff too,
And yeah,
because
but my brother went swimming among clumps of paper pulp. I think most people would
absolutely
agree that we shouldn't be dumping that in the river.
no.
Yeah, you see, they then on the other hand, you can get to nitpicking to the point where nobody can do anything.
And we don't want that.
And we
And
don't
that's
want
sort
that
of,
either. And you don't want that either.
in a political respect, that's sort of what we're trying to
Well, one of the problems,
rethink.
I saw an interesting book, and where you see a lot of the political stuff, it's highly verbal. Highly verbal tends to overgeneralize. Visual thinker, I'm seeing something much more specific. I can see specific things. Okay, I went to a third world country. This was about 20 years ago, and the little slummy homes, the crap went right into the river. It was beyond disgusting. You know we've got to clean some of that stuff up. You see, a visual thinker thinks about things much more specific. Much more specific. You tend to overgeneralize. Well, we just got to clean up pollution. Yes. But then you can get to the point where the standards get so strict you can't do anything.
Right. And that's where we don't want to go.
And you don't want to go there. No,
exactly.
You don't want to go there.
Precisely. Yeah, exactly. We don't want to go there. We want to be able to function, but we don't want to be able to function in an irresponsible manner.
Well, and the other thing, there was a book I saw reviewed in the Wall Street Journal, and it talked about the lawyer mentality. Okay, verbally try to block stuff. The engineering mentality, the country that has that mentality, gets a high-speed rail built, and we don't. Because so many lawmakers are verbal, law backgrounds.
Wow, that's something really interesting. So,
they we did manage to get our road widened, even though it did wreck some front lawns. Nobody lost their house. Nobody lost their house.
Nobody lost a house. It made them smaller.
No one lost a house.
And the sidewalk was much closer to their front door.
It greatly reduced the front lawns of quite a few people.
Right. But with like you said, that the huge benefit was the freeing up of the traffic to the
university. And this was right where I live, so I saw the benefit of doing that.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I so much appreciate your time, Temple. I'm going, as you know, I'm going to reach out to you again, and we're going to do this again because I really appreciate you taking the time. I know how busy your schedule is. I know how much you accomplish.
We want to be figuring out how do we actually solve problems.
And I think we did in a sense in this interview too, but we're going to do it again. So I think we did accomplish
and I think it's an important skill for students to learn. And I let them pick out a subject in animal behavior that interests them. A lot of people are interested in dogs. Fine. Ask something specific about it, then read studies about it.
It's incredible. It's an incredible way to teach that. That I've never thought of that before, but that is an incredible way to convey.
I tell my students that it might be one of the most important things you learn in college.
I'm thinking that right now. That's
now you see. Then there's an educational database called ERIC, and I've been a little bit on that, but it's limited. It's limited to education materials.
And what is that called?
Eric, like a man's name, ERIC.
Eric. Got
Eric. It. And PubMed is mostly medical and veterinary.
Yep, medical and
veterinary. I'm not going to go. If I want to look up something with physics or a nuclear power plant, I'm not going to do that on PubMed. I could do it on Google Scholar. I could do it on Web of Science, but not. And I'm certainly not going to go to Eric to look up that.
Eric, got it.
Yeah, that's education database.
Yes, ma'am. I am excited to get into.
And that's one I don't use very much because I think it's paywalled. But again, if you went to university library, you physically go in the library,
and they'll allow you to access
those databases. And the other thing that people can do is, let's say I find a paper that's not open access. More and more papers now open access. So I find an abstract I really like, and they want you to spend $35 on buying the paper. just that one paper, write to the author. You
Oh
may have
yeah.
you may have to go back to Google or a regular search engine to find the author's email. Sometimes it's on the abstract, author's email, and ask for a copy of that paper. Now, don't ask an author to send every paper they have. That makes professors crazy. Just ask for one or two papers that you're really interested in. A lot of professors, they can send those to you.
I didn't know that. Thank you.
Yeah, you can. They can send those to you, but don't. I've had people write to me, send me every paper you've got on cattle behavior during handling. No, please be more specific. The other thing I'm shocked at when people write to me is the amount of bad email addresses I get.
Oh,
Oh, that happens all the time. Emails that don't work.
wow. Thank
Yeah,
God mine's simple.
yeah, but that happens all the time. And they wonder why I didn't answer it. You know, but you can write to a professor and ask for 2 or 3 papers.
Yep. I'm going to do just that. That's another avenue for me. Thank you, Temple.
No, but that's something you're going to find on a lot of things. There'll be a lot of things will be a lot more mixed.
I'm going to reach out.
Things aren't as clear cut as politicians present them as.
Not at all. I'm digging deep. Believe me, this podcast is all about me digging deep into things, and I'm finding out a lot that I didn't realize before.
Yeah, you
So
want to look at about how nuclear power plants work. You can scientific papers. Some of them will be some hard reading, but you can find that on these databases. I wouldn't go to PubMed for that or ERIC, but other databases you can find it.
Google Scholar
Google
will have it.
Scholar, the Web of Science, and Elsevier journals would have it. They cover all the scientific subjects.
Yep. I'm gonna start.
And the more general databases also cover, literature subjects too.
Yes, ma'am. I'm gonna start working on that. And I will be in contact. Thank you. Thank you so
Okay, well,
much.
I guess it's about time for me to have lunch right now.
it it it's unfortunate. I love talking to you, but I know I'm a talker, so I'm gonna let you go, and I'm gonna reach out to you, and we're gonna do it again, Temple. I hope you're
All right, well, that
receptive to
sounds
that.
really good, and it's been great to talk to you.
It's been a pleasure, my pleasure. Thank you so much.
All
I
right,
very much
great to talk
appreciate
to
it.
you.
Great to talk to you.
Okay, I'm
Thank you,
going to leave
Temple.
the meeting, and thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, great. Yeah, bye.